This is one-on-one session with the ForumIAS founder and director Ayush Sinha. In this session, students are asked questions to test their preparedness for the personality test. One-on-one sessions are not mock panel sessions.
Let us have a couple of questions. First, can you introduce yourself to me?
I'm Khadi Borkar. I come from the town of Amravati in Maharashtra. I have done my graduation in civil engineering, and thereafter I pursued my post-graduation in construction management from Ahemdabad. After that, I completed my distance post-graduation in public administration. I had a short stint in KPMG as a consultant, after which I also spent about a year in a social enterprise in the Khadi and Village Industry sector, sir. And after that, I joined State Bank of India as a probationary officer, wherein I will be completing my probation in June this year.
All right. Who is the current chairperson of SBI?
So, Mr. Khara, Dinesh Khara is the chairperson of SBI, sir.
Can you recall any lady chairperson of SBI in recent times?
Yes, sir. I think the tenure before this, and there was a gap in between, Mrs. Arundhati Bhattacharya was the chairperson, lady chairperson.
So, if you see banking is one sector where we often see that there are a lot of women in banking. What is the reason for it?
Sir, I think I view it in this way that banks have promoted participation of women as in the formal employed sector, and it's very welcoming of having women on board. I see it in that way, sir. Perhaps no specific reason, but then they are encouraging women to pursue this.
Think for a moment and tell me why it is sometimes, for example, for banking industry, why it is better to have women.
So because usually banking, it deals with finances, and finances have traditionally been the male domain. They have been the decision makers of finances. In the household, at least that is how it is. But when you see a women talk about finance and financial planning, financial literacy, it sort of sends a good message. This is one of the reasons why having women in the banking sector is quite encouraging and a good side. Apart from that, it is usually said that women have better soft skills than men. So that is good for marketing and sales also of financial products.
So your name is Ketki. What does this name mean?
So Ketki is the name of a flower. It is a cream colored flower, and the essence Kevda perfume, it is extracted from that, sir. It is found in the coastal areas, and it also has some mythological significance. It is used to worship Lord Shiva and Lord Ganesh, Goddess Lakshmi. So that is good.
You're also a civil engineer.
Yes, sir.
So civil engineer and a banker and also student of public administration, a KPMG consultant, too many hats you've worn in your life. Tell me, with respect to civil engineering, I mean, these days we see that, our buildings, office buildings are having glass facades.
Yes, sir.
Right? What could be the possible reason? Why do they go for, is it simply aping the West, making it just to look aesthetic and then put in a gas chamber or a greenhouse gas?
So,
Think and tell me the answer, Ketki. Okay? You're accountable for every word that you speak.
yes, sir. Sir, certainly the glass-fronted buildings, they offer better aesthetic value. However, it is also a practice which is largely borrowed from the West because it helps in the internal building maintenance, especially the HVAC systems. It is more efficient that way. And it is suitable for climates which have extreme weathers, either too cold or too hot. However, in the Indian context, sir, I think mildly aping this form of building might not be that productive because an architect should take into consideration the local factors as well, where that city is located, where the building has to be built, the local climatic weather factors, and accordingly we should go for a design for the building facade.
Okay, some people say that this glass buildings, they absorb a lot of heat and therefore increase the cooling cost. Is that correct?
So for that, I am not aware of the data per se. But it has certainly led to the increase in the urban heat island effect, where a lot of glass-fronted buildings are crowded. For example, the Bandra Kurla complex in Mumbai, it has a lot of glass-fronted buildings, and a sort of a microclimatic zone is has appeared in that area, which has increased to the heat and humidity of that localized area, sir.
But don't you think it, logically speaking, I mean, here is Rajendra Nagar or Karol Bagh, which have concrete buildings. They will be the ones who actually, which will be actually creating the urban, heat islands, given that concrete will absorb the heat slowly and release it slowly. Glass will either allow some of it to pass through and reflect others, and will not be slowly radiating, in my opinion.
So glass-fronted buildings, as you rightly said, sir, it would reflect fast, and during the daytime they would would probably exaggerate the urban heat island effect. And concrete, as again you rightly mentioned, sir, it absorbs and it radiates slowly. So
So therefore, heat island effect is going to be more in concrete buildings.
Sir, I think there would be a myriad of other factors also. What is the green cover surrounding a building, and how much of a concrete
other factors keeping constant. Okay, all right. So what is the reason that they made? One is aesthetics. What other reason is there why they make it with glass facade?
So the
government is also focusing on getting such glass facade buildings now.
Sir, I'm not aware about the government, but I'm sure they would have a very sound reason for that. Perhaps maybe from the green buildings perspective, because there is a push for that as well. And maintaining the internal building temperature is easier if you have if you can have a controlled environment inside.
Yes. What is a green building according to you?
So a green building is one which does not have a high environmental cost during the course of its overall life cycle.
So there are several green rating agencies for buildings.
Yes.
Can you name some of them?
So there is the Indian Green Building Council. We also have TERI, which does its own assessment. This is in India, and internationally also there are a few, so I'm not able to recall.
So these days when we go and inspect buildings, we say that they offer pillarless halls, huge halls that do not have a single pillar in between. Does not this would lead to a bulge formation or a concave formation on the floor? They're somehow making it so that it is good for anyone, including maybe somebody can build auditoriums or movie halls or just marriage halls. So they prefer this. Business requirements are forcing these builders to build pillarless halls. Does it not compromise on the structural safety of the building?
So the structural strength of the building, there are various structural elements, primarily the beam and the columns. So if you have to go for a longer span of a beam, the entire slab or which forms the floor for the it can be either a ribbed kind of a structure or so there are various other types of slabs which I'm not able to recall, but we can go for a ribbed structure.
Studied public administration.
Yes, sir.
There was a thinker in public administration who was said to be ahead of his/her times. Who am I talking about?
So you're referring to Mary Parker Foley.
Why was she said to be ahead of her times?
So she belonged to the classical era, which was the earlier, which were the earlier years of public administration. Focus was on efficiency, economy, effectiveness. But she gave certain concepts like dynamic administration and conflict management, which were novel ideas at that time, because she was essentially stressing upon the law of the situation. As per the situation, the organization or the leader has to take decisions and act. The situation orders both the employer and the employee, rather than the employer having a unilateral control and direction over the employee. So these were ideas which was there in the day-to-day organization, but she managed to put it in very simple words and in a very nice manner.
You were coming from the time of Taylor and Fayol.
Yes,
right? Sir. Taylor came up with principles of management for the shop floor.
Yes, sir.
Work measurement, classifying workers into different types. The only purpose was how to get maximum output. Right? Mary Parker Foley was focused on human relations, isn't it? So that was a different time. Today human relations are more important in organizations, but during that time I don't think organizations were focusing on human relations.
So I beg to differ a little bit that in today's time, I feel that human relations matter as much as the internal mechanisms of efficiency and economy. Both are needed. And as per the second part of your observation, sir, during those times, human relations were taken care of indirectly. They were not as prominently discussed as they should have been. And the later thinkers like Berry Parker Foley and Mayo, all of them, they
I'm
stressed
not
upon.
debating that. I'm questioning that during she was said to be ahead of her time because it's a thinker, while human relations were handled informally because the industrial revolution had just taken. So the other thinkers of our times, they would primarily focusing on efficiency and output,
Yes, sir.
right, by some sort of coercive or regressive means, if we were to put it on one extreme. But don't you think there was no other thinker who was talking on at that point of time, because he was preceded by these thinkers? So in the theory of public administration, there was no other thinker who was talking about human relations, and so I don't think there was anyone talking about human relations before that. That's why she was ahead of her times.
Sir, as far as I remember, she talked about dynamic administration and conflict resolution, which was not addressed earlier, and human relations. So,
What was her approach to conflict resolution?
so she promoted a win-win situation, that is an integrated approach, rather than going for a win-lose kind of an approach.
And what was the approach propounded by thinkers such as Taylor?
Sir, I'm not aware if Taylor has talked about conflict resolution. And
How Taylor deal with conflicts?
Sir, Taylor excessively focused on rules and
Rules and
regulations and
domination.
standards.
And domination.
And
That would Taylor's approach would be enforcing the rules.
sir, I think if I may beg to differ a bit again, enforcing the rules, perhaps that would be an extreme way to put it, but he emphasized the importance of having rules rather than going by rule of thumb. He emphasized on a scientific way of doing things, especially for the repetitive and slightly
That's part of the
monotonous.
problem. No? With the scientific approach, you have a dehumanizing approach, isn't it? That is how it dehumanizes it. Something like when you walk in, everybody tells you have 17 minutes to go for the interview. Now that dehumanizes the whole conversation. That was the Taylor's approach. If Mary Parker Foley was there, she would have a different approach. She would say, you go in, and as long as you want to speak, you go ahead and speak. You should be satisfied.
Sir, I'm very sure Mary Parker Foley would have gone by the law of the situation, and 17 minutes would have become 21 minutes or even 12 minutes if she would have deemed fit.
So less scientific but more human.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You've also been working with State Bank of India. So there has been a report, a very famous report that has indicted a certain Indian company, where a lot of public sector banks have an exposure. Which report am I talking about?
So, are you referring to the Adani Hindenburg?
Yes, the Hindenburg research report. So Hindenburg, what is this company about?
So, from as far as I know, they are a small firm that undertakes research about research, and they deal in. Sir, I will not be able to put it properly. I have.
It's a short seller, a research firm and a short seller.
Yes, sir.
Right. This word Hindenburg, why did they keep the name Hindenburg? Where is the name coming from?
I'm not aware of it, sir.
What is the current non-performing asset with SBI?
Sir, I'm not aware about the figure.
When does an asset is classified by a bank as a non-performing asset?
So, NPA, there are subcategories under that as well. First, we have the doubtful assets, then the substandard 1, 2, 3. So, if an asset remains in the substandard category for more than 12 months, then it is classified as a loss asset or an NPA asset, sir.
Let's say I take a home loan. That's an asset for the bank, isn't it? That loan? A loan is
on the bank's balance sheet, it would actually the collateral would be the asset, sir, but then on the bank's balance sheet, it would not really be an asset. It would reflect as a liability, because
the loan would be a liability in the bank's balance sheets.
Yes, sir, it would be reflected as that.
And how about my fixed deposit with the bank?
The fixed deposits are also, sir, actually a liability. I would like to correct my earlier statement, sir. I'm not sure particularly, now I'm confused slightly, but the fixed deposits are certainly a liability on the bank.
And the loan that is there is an asset, as far as I understand, to the bank on which it earns the money.
Yes, sir, it earns
How
the
many
interest.
days before I default do the banks start classifying it as a non-performing asset?
So, if any borrower is missing out even one installment, it comes under the bank's radar, and we try to prevent it slipping into a default, basically.
How many days is the limit that the banks have defined, or RBI has defined for the banks?
So I'll have to look into the exact limits.
You are from Amravati, Maharashtra. Maharashtra has the undue burden of farmer suicides.
Yes.
What is the reason?
So, farmer suicides, Maharashtra certainly has an undue burden, and in that also Vidarbha region from where I come from, that unfortunately has larger share of the farmer suicides. Primary reasons being, sir, cultivation of the BT cotton and poverty, as well as prevalence of the black cotton soil, which renders the other crop cultivation and other pursuits difficult for the farmer. So it's a wholesome chain of not being able to shift to other kind of employment and poverty and even climate.
When does a farmer commit suicide or is forced to commit suicide? Just give me one reason. Think for a bit and give me one reason.
So I would say that a farmer, if I have to see him as an individual, I would see that he would commit suicide, he or she would commit suicide when they are losing faith that they are not able to live life in a productive and happy way like any other normal
Don't
person.
you think
So
that would be
overburden.
common to a lot of poor people? That not
Certainly,
every
sir.
person who is undergoing poverty.
Certainly, sir. And somebody, like in case of the farmers, they are defeated psychologically also and
No,
also financially.
think and tell me, when will he be forced to commit suicide? He is going through all this, but that will not be the trigger point when he commits suicide.
So when there would be a lot of stress and pressure on the farmer, financial specifically, which would perhaps trigger an immediate reaction and
Yes,
response.
you're close, that financial pressure will trigger.
And he sees no way out of it, and he's trapped in that situation. He sees no escape.
Recently, a very prominent member of the parliament was disqualified because he was convicted for an offense, for a period of not less than 2 years. Interestingly, the Representation of People's Act, Section 8(4), it did provide, it's a crisis situation for the parliament when one member gets convicted, for the union parliament sitting in New Delhi, and somewhere very far in a remote court in any part of this huge country, there is a criminal conviction, and the conviction is of 2 years or more. What happens in the parliament? A parliamentarian loses his seat. So therefore, the Representation of People's Act had a safety provision. Are you aware of this issue?
Sir, I'm aware of the issue. I am not able to recall the RPA Act provision, sir.
All right. So the RPA Act said that for sitting members, they should be getting 3 months before they'll be disqualified. In a certain case in the Supreme Court, however, this provision of RPA was rendered as unconstitutional. Which case am I talking about?
So I'm not able to recall right now.
Ketki, do you think there has been a paradigm shift in our foreign policy?
So there certainly has been a prominent shift, but whether it is a paradigm shift, so I'll have to read more upon that.
Why do you think there is a shift, huge shift? What do you see differently?
Sir, as of now, we have always been very vocal about what we believe to be our way of doing foreign diplomacy. But now we are also being assertive about what we want, especially at a time when the world is again on the verge of being polarized very strongly. And India is also in a much better position than what it was earlier in the 1960s or 40s.
Ketki, you have been donning so many hats. Why civil services? What is your motivation?
So my major motivation to be a part of the civil services is the job content and the context. And also this platform because it provides a variety of areas where I can contribute. And throughout my life, being very active in extracurricular and having tested myself in various situations, I feel that I have qualities suited better for an administrator rather than being labeled in one particular category as a banker or as a technical person. So I feel that I would want to be a part of this organization, which is big, which is growing, which is changing, and which is also catering to public welfare overall.
All right, Kirti, your interview is over.
Thank you, sir.